You are Locked On Falcons Postcast, part of Locked On Atlanta on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Falcons Postcast, your home for the best Falcons talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere else but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste, and of course, joining me are Jarvis Davis and Aaron Freeman. Now, this episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. The Locked On Falcons Postcast is also part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, guys, the Falcons gave the fans a nice gift on Christmas Eve, at least the ones who actually wanted them to still win out for the rest of the season, as opposed to
glad you clarified.
Yes, exactly. Because we know there are the others that kind of trolled Jarvis on his feed today in utter disbelief about why. But you know what? On this postcast, we are going to take it as a positive, and we're going to deep dive on the last home game of the regular season a little bit later. Then we'll talk about what's next. But first, let's talk JD and Freeze takeaways on this 29-10 solid win by the Falcons today. And Jarvis, your comment was straight and ahead and consistent. 8 has a position now.
Yes. Number 8, Kyle Pitts actually plays tight end. We're no longer talking about positionless football. He lined up in the slot. He had his hand in the dirt, catching passes out in that particular spot. So I really like the way Kyle Pitts was used today. He was actually, effective and shout out to Taylor Hani for that throw on that touchdown pass to Kyle Pitts. There was the end zone coverage, and I love the fact that a 6'6", 240-pound guy is running through a zone. It's easy for him to find a nice little window to settle down into. And you saw the throw that Taylor Heinicke made, and Arthur Smith used him at the tight end position, and he was able to take advantage of some matchups that he had today. And that's how he should be used going forward.
Yeah, and I think it's critical, like you said as well, that when the opportunity presents itself, give the ball to KP. KP can do some things if put in the right position to actually catch the ball, go down the field, and had a guy who actually put the ball where it needed to be as well. Now, for you, had another takeaway that I thought was a good one too, and that is on the other side of the ball, Gardner Minshew out here giving away gifts, but it was thanks to the Falcons pass rush.
Yeah, you saw the Falcons have a real pass rush today for basically the first time all year long. They got 5 sacks in this game. Jarvis and I were talking on Friday on Locked On Falcons about, hey, Zach Harrison's coming along pretty nicely. He finished with 2 sacks today, was getting pressure consistently. Calais Campbell was disruptive. Caden Ellis was disruptive. We didn't get to see a ton of David Onyemata. So, it's not as if like his presence single-handedly affected it, but it just gave the Falcons just enough today, in addition to Bud Dupree having a great day, Arnold Ebiketie showing up. So you saw the entire front all sort of thrive, I guess you could say. Some of the sacks were coverage sacks, so the guys on the back end were also doing their job as well. So it was a lot of good for the Falcons defense, and you needed to see this because without Michael Pittman, the Colts were missing their sort of go-to guy, and the Falcons needed to take advantage. If they could consistently get Gardner Minshew off of his spot, if they could get pressure, force him to go away from his initial read, he was already kind of hamstrung without Pittman being that sort of initial read, like that was kind of the formula for success for this Falcons defense to really put a lid on this Colts offense that's been kind of red hot over the last month. So it was a great day for the Falcons pass rush, and it's nice to see it. For we've been complaining all year long about, hey, when is this pass rush going to show up? And it's like, okay, week 16, Christmas gift, I'll take it.
And you're right. You saw some help from the back end. You saw Richie Grant get a sack, 5 total tackles. Jesse Bates, of course, being Jesse Bates. I mean, he did what he did, but also 6 tackles there, and AJ Terrell with 5 tackles. So you really kind of saw that secondary pull up and say, hey, we're going to be a part of this and we're going to do our jobs. And also when you give us an opportunity, we'll help you do your jobs as well. So yeah, good to see that. And Jarvis, I really overall liked the game that Ryan Nielsen called. I thought it was an aggressive game. I thought it utilized so many of the pieces and the tools that he had in the toolkit that maybe, and granted, he got some tools back in the toolkit to Free's point, didn't need David Onyemata a lot, but you got just enough of what you needed. But I did, again, like the play calling from Ryan Nielsen today.
Yeah, it was so cool to kind of, you get like a nice little bird's eye view when you sit in the press box. It's almost like, and I on the goal line, I just love the way those guys were communicating, talking about Clark Phillips and AJ Terrell, because what a lot of people really aren't talking about, like he came back and took Jeff Okudah's spot. Like Jeff was healthy,
Yes.
Guys
and I apologize. I forgot to mention that. You're absolutely right. And because that caught my eye too at the beginning of the game. Oh, well, I see who's in the one spot here on the depth chart.
And it just goes to show you what that development is on the defensive side of the football. I'm talking about Clark Phillips coming in, supplanting somebody after he gets acclimated to the defense, understand what the coach is asking of him. DeMarco Hellams gets to start today. He understands what it is. Like, even if somebody catches the ball on him, the guy is going down to the ground exactly where he caught the football. And that's what you ask for. And even Richie Grant, with being supplanted, he's still getting involved. Ryan is still figuring out ways to utilize maximize his talent, right? So that's what you look for in a coach. If a guy's not a starter for you, hey, how can you use him? How can you maximize his production? And that's what he's been able to do. So yeah, Ryan Nielsen gets a lot of credit. Aaron and I talked about what Zach Harrison has been able to do, and I even did some little digging into the stats. I was like, all right, what's this rookie sack record for the Falcons? Oh, I had to go all the way back to 1983. Mike Pitz, 7 sacks. Yeah, Zach Harris got a little work to do, but hey, look, if he can get close to that, that is a win. You're talking about a guy in the 3rd round, 75th overall pick, and nobody really had any expectations. I know I really didn't because, I felt like he was raw. And when you get a guy like that with the size and the size that he has and like the prototypical defensive end in a Ryan Neal defense is what it's going to look like. Not a multiple. I'm talking about a 4 down, even front. This is what this Falcons defense is headed towards. And when you get a guy like that, you come in and you start to see him kind of slowly work his way into that rotation. And then he starts to get to a point where, oh, yeah, he's looking good against the run. Now he's all right. Okay, now this dude is learning how to rush. He's starting to put it together. He's starting to get that technique down, retracing the steps and sacking the quarterback. All those things kind of add up to, all right, they got it right with this dude. They got it right with this dude. I will continue to say it. People are going to get tired of it, but I'm going to continue to say it. Arthur Smith got this hire right, and it's probably going to help him keep his job.
Indeed. And also, when you look at the fact that we're only 15 games in Free, and we're talking about 36 sacks on the year for this team compared to last season, 17 games through 21 sacks. I mean, that's the difference. There's a marked difference in what you're seeing from this Falcons defense. But all in all, we still have to give a lot of kudos to this offense because there are just things that we have not seen. And one of the things that Jarvis called out in Taylor Heinicke connecting with Kyle Pitts in the end zone for that touchdown is the fact that the play before it was a 32-yard run from Bijan Robinson. When is the last time we talked about a long run from Bijan?
The Titans game, maybe. Maybe he got one against the Saints. It's been a minute.
Right, or at least one that actually puts the Falcons in a position like this to get a score.
Yeah. It's you saw the Falcons offense look explosive and look explosive on the ground. You got a 32-yard from Bijan that set up that Kyle Pitts scored. You got a 31-yard run from Tyler Algier that was a score. As well as Bijan had a nice long run. I think it was for like 25-26 at the end of the game. So you saw this running game do the thing that they haven't really done all that much this year that they did consistently last year, which was why people were so optimistic about, what is Bijan going to look like in this offense? Because you're getting these big runs from Tyler Algier, you're getting these big runs from Cordero Patterson, even Avery Williams doing in the mix, and you're like, okay, what can Bijan do behind this sort of offensive line? And we've seen glimpses of it, as you said, T, but it hasn't been consistent, especially since the beginning of the year. And to see the ground game get back to, we can pop off 20-yard runs against a Colts defense that I know statistically you look at them overall this season has not been very good against the run, but that's mostly because Grover Stewart missed half the season. And like when Grover Stewart's been healthy, like the stats are when he's healthy, they're like a top 12 run defense. And when he's not in the lineup, they're like the worst run defense in the league. And the Falcons, with Grover Stewart in the lineup, making a couple of plays, he got Drew Dalman on a couple of times, but the Falcons were still able to run the football because they were able to get that outside run play, the tosses, all those types of things, getting to the perimeter, which we haven't seen this team consistently do. And when you can do that with Algier, with Patterson, with Bijan, and give those guys just, hey, you just got to make one guy miss in space, then that's when the Falcons can get these big gains that can set up their offense and keep this thing moving.
Indeed. And there's one thing that we're going to talk about later on, of course, kind of get into it a little bit more in the deep dive, but I wanted to just kind of mention it as we're going in, just to kind of tease, because, hey, there is something that the Falcons didn't do today that actually worked out for them as well. And we're going to talk about that in the deep dive. But before we get to our deep dive, hey, we've got something else that we want to talk to you guys about before, again, we get into Falcons and Colts a little bit more. This episode of the Locked On Falcons postcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Now, it's depending on where you are, it could be getting colder, it could be getting warmer. Our weather is always like on again, off again. But if you're kind of tired of dealing with it and you just want to stay inside, might be a good time for you to check out FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. And a couple stores are still open for a couple hours if you need to get some last minute Christmas gifts. So this might be a good look for you. If you've been thinking about FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action, because the app is so easy to use, very user-friendly. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/locked-on. We've got 2 games left in the season before it's all said and done, but you've got some betting that you can still do, by the way, this particular day. So check out FanDuel. Again, that's FanDuel.com/locked-on. FanDuel is the official partner of the NFL. All right, guys, I alluded to it in our first seg, and I want to kind of start off with this before we get into the deep dive for the offense and the defense, but it might also dovetail into the conversation about the offense. And the reason I keep going back to that, the reason I keep going back to it, JD, is because we have not had much of an opportunity this season to talk about effectiveness and efficiency on the offensive side of the ball. Taylor Heinicke had a nice day, 23 for 33, 229 yards and a touchdown. And one of the things, JD, that you've said over and over again is that you don't ever want to see a quarterback for the Falcons get into throwing 40 times in the game, right? So 33, kind of nice as far as his efficiency, got it almost 100 QB rating today, or QB rating today. And then you look at the fact that this is a number we don't really talk about as well on offense, and that's no turnovers. Oh my goodness, you protected the ball, and you protected the ball on the ground. You protected the ball in the air, and that's how you get to 29 points, right? So I think that's one thing that's really, really, I kind of wanted to start off there, because too many times we've had a conversation, and that's why, of course, there's a change under center, but too many times the conversation has been the Falcons have a fourth quarter, either a lead or they have the ability to take the lead, and the turnover takes that away from them. This time, Jarvis, the Falcons took a 2-score lead into the fourth quarter and extended their lead for the win. What was different on offense this Sunday, in addition to having Taylor Heinicke under center versus Desmond Ridder?
I think them being able to take advantage of zone coverage, but like you said, like I mentioned earlier with Kyle Pitts, you have big bodies running through zone coverage. It's pretty easy to hit those guys. You saw that with Drake London, and now granted, Taylor Heinicke did put the ball in harm's way. There was some throws where I think the Falcoholic tweeted out that he was throwing into some mouse hole doors, keyholes. He's finding a way to get the ball in there, but he was really getting it in there because those guys are such big targets. And then one thing that I did like about what Taylor Heinicke did when he was throwing the football at times, like he threw those guys kind of where they were settled in, but kind of threw them to a point where they can actually get some yards out of the catch, specifically Drake London. I think that was some good time that he was able to do that. So when you have that type of, body styles and your guys your receivers, even tight ends or whether it be tight ends or wide receivers. You got those guys out there receiving the ball against Gus Bradley, who likes to run that zone coverage on there, and they don't necessarily match up like that because they've never been guys who can necessarily play that man coverage like that. So I think it was just a really good matchup for the Falcons today, as they were able to take advantage of some good coverage, some zone coverage that the Colts that they knew they were going to get from the Colts.
Taking into consideration some good coverage as well. Free, the other thing I saw in that is it allows you to be less vanilla. 9 players touched the ball. 9 players were able to get at least one catch in this game. And that's another thing we don't talk about as well. It seemed like, unfortunately, there were times where Drake London was a little blanky, and that kind of was a little too much of maybe a safety blankie. But when you go to 9 receivers and, it's I think it's been a minute. I was like, oh, Kadero Hodge, is that you? Because, and that's just one example of how you're seeing that. Or Jonnu Smith getting, 4 receptions and 6 targets. I think I like that piece as well, just trying to mix it up and not stay so vanilla. And even something that the three of us have talked about, and even with Tori on our Atlanta football party, is the fact that sometimes the Falcons have seemed to be playing, especially on offense, conservatively, playing not to lose at the end of a game. And it just makes you, want to scratch your head. And I feel like today they were actually playing to win from the ensuing kickoff all the way to the double zeros.
Yeah. I can't remember if it was the Houston game or the Tampa Bay game earlier this season where we talked about how they were able to spread the ball around to like 11 different receivers in that game. And that was kind of sort of a big part of why they had success on that day to get the win. And you're right, we haven't talked about this offense really spreading the ball around all that much the last couple of weeks. It's just been like, okay, one guy or maybe 2 guys sort of dominate it. And when you can make defenses defend the entire field and defend every player on the field, as they say, every blade of grass, that makes it much, much harder for defenses. And the Falcons, when this offense is working, they're able to run the ball and they're able to sort of distribute the ball pretty evenly among these players. And credit goes to Taylor Heinicke, right? He had a kind of typical sort of Taylor Heinicke game. You had that kind of fumbled snap early in the second half. You're like, what is it with the Falcons and fumbling snaps? It's just like, I don't know what's going on with that. And so I was just like, man, okay. It doesn't matter who's at the quarterback. Someone's going to mishandle a snap every single week. But like you saw, the team kind of settle in after that point, and the middle 8, right? We've been talking about that all year long with Tori on the football party, where the final 4 minutes of the first half and the first 4 minutes of the second half, and the Falcons score twice on both of those drives. They get a field goal to close out the first half, and then they go down the field and score on that Algier touchdown to start the second half, and it's like, where has this team been all season long? Because like basically every week it's like, oh, here comes the middle 8 where the Falcons completely, screw it over and don't take advantage of any momentum that they have at this point in the game. And it's like, nope, this week. And it's like, okay, like, it took 16 weeks. As I told Jarvis before we jumped on air, beggars can't be choosers when it comes to this football team. We've been begging all year long for this team to kind of finish a first half strong and start a second half strong. And I think that was a big factor in why this team was able to sort of win by this margin on Christmas Eve.
Yeah, and during the swoon, we were begging and pleading Free for them to please, offense, can you give your defense a break? Can you keep them off the field so that they can actually be as effective as we want them to be or need them to be, especially in the end? Because real talk, I know everyone keeps saying, oh, the defense, gave up the game-winning score last week against, the Panthers. Well, yeah, you do that if you stay on the field and finally it catches up with you. And that was the other thing, Jarvis, that I felt like we saw a defense that could play to their level because they were fresh. They were fresh. They were rotating guys in and out. But also when you look at the time of possession, and you look at the Falcons having the ball, and granted, the Colts had the ball for 30 minutes, so they technically had the ball like almost a minute more than the Falcons, but it was the way that they had that ball. And a lot of that was in the first half, to be honest. So you give that defense a little bit of a break at halftime. They come back, they're refreshed. And I feel like, Jarvis, for the first time in a while, I'm asking you how that offense allowed us to see different things or different approaches for the Falcons defense.
You know what? like this is a game that I feel like the defense was able to, control the game from
Yeah.
start to finish.
Mhm.
Like they were able to finish. And I've always kind of held back from criticizing defense, especially when
Same.
they're giving away games in the Minnesota game and the Arizona game, not being able to sack the quarterback. Obviously, it's an issue, but I give them some grace because they've been the most consistent group that we've seen from this team throughout the whole entire season. But today, it was cool to see because like when you get into a mode where like the defense out there having fun, these cats out there dancing, and then of course when Jesse Bates gets an interception, it's just like it's a party. Like yeah, man,
Campbell gets a sack. It's like
this man heard all my little disdain that I had for him in the offseason. Like, yep, I'm about to be an all-pro Jarvis because of you. You know what I'm saying? Like I watch the postcast, I check out the game, I check out the podcast, Locked On Falcons. I see you make an appearance on my boy Aaron, you know what I'm saying, who got me here to this city, you know what I'm saying? Like, so yeah, but yeah, it's cool to see those cats out there having fun like that. Everybody getting involved, getting sacks. You can see Bud Dupree up there kicking himself at the end of the game because he couldn't get his hands on Gardner Minshew. I know T, that's a little touchy subject for you, but hey, he's out here trying to just get after it. Calais Campbell is just out here getting checks. Mike Rothstein all in the pockets. You know what I'm saying? Like, hey man, 500,000. For that 5.5 sacks on the season. That's what I'm talking about. That's the type of stuff that you want to get to. I want to see that stuff. A lot of people may think that, hey, man, Jarvis hates the Falcons and he wants them to lose. They want to fire the coach. Yeah, if they don't play like this, I ain't going to say, you'll never hear a bad word come out of my mouth.
Right.
This is the type of games that we want to see on a consistent basis. We haven't seen this. So for them to play like they did today with everything on the line and Arthur Smith jobs on the line, reportedly, allegedly, like for them to come out here and play like this, like it sets the tone for what needs to happen next week.
Indeed. And we'll talk about that definitely in next up. But yeah, I think that there were so many examples. I remember one of the examples in seeing the defense get back to being the defense that it was. And like you said, playing fun, not just fast and physical, those cliche-ish terms. But yeah, I saw those guys really out there flying around and having fun flying around like this. And you saw kind of that momentum build on their side throughout the game. And there was that one series where the Colts, okay, granted, you converted on 4th down, good for you. But then the Falcons had back-to-back tackles for loss, and they got pressure on Gardner Minshew, and there was also a pick. And I really felt like, okay, this is what we've been clamoring for. This is what we've been hoping to see on a consistent basis. And also going back to something you said, Jarvis, I think we have been shown grace or been gracious to the defense as well, because they were the ones that got really hit with the bad injuries out of the gate. They were the ones that lost Grady Jarrett, right, for the season. They were the ones that lost David Onyemata for a couple games. So I feel like we had to give a little grace, and these guys were still scrapping and scraping despite the position that the offense put them in oftentimes. So yeah, it's always good when we can talk about a good all-around game, even on special teams, talk about a good all-around game from this team. Now we're going to talk about what's next because, hey, there still are 2 more games that have to be played, at least in the regular season, for this Falcons team. So we'll talk about it in Who's Got Next. This episode is also brought to you by Gametime. This episode, of course, of the Locked On Falcons postcast. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Gametime. It helps to take the worry out of buying tickets for your next big event. And let's face it, who wants to be worried and anxious during the holidays? This is supposed to be a festive and happy time for you. And one of the ways you can do that is to keep the anxiety down by using a fast, easy, user-friendly tool like Gametime. That's for sports, music, comedy, theater events, you name it. Killer last-minute deals, all in prices, all there for you. And it takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Another thing I really, really like about Gametime, this app allows for you to always get the best price. That's a guarantee from them. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. So it's easy. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So again, create that account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, guys. So let's talk about what is next up, because like we said, the Falcons have wrapped up the season at home. Nice to wrap up the season on a high note as well with that win. Now they've got to go on the road to Chicago to face the Bears, and of course to wrap this regular season up at the Saints. And because, Jarvis, you have me saying this in a special way, I'm going to start with you after today. Is it still more about securing jobs in 2024? And that's whether it's on the sidelines, on the field, or even in the front office, or is this also about fighting for playing past January 7th?
I think it's still the former, because we've seen them play decent games this year, but can you do it back-to-back games? And God forbid, can you do it in 3 games straight? Because you've never won 3 games in a row. So, because I think that regardless of the playing past the last game of the season, like, you have to be able to show that you can consistently put a good product out on the field. And if you aren't able to do that, which is overall, if you look at the whole body of work, you haven't been able to do that. So That's why I've always kind of hinted at, hey, I understand these 3 games are important, but we shouldn't put so much weight into just these 3 games. We need to look at the overall body of work and then make a decision from there, speaking to Arthur Blank. But I think that, I think he's still coaching for that job status. Like, I'm sure that he needs to have that same sense of urgency that he had today by putting together this game plan and on the offensive side, and Ryan Nielsen putting together the game plan for the defensive side, and these players coming out here and saying, okay, hey, we like the guy that's at the helm, and we're going to show that on the field.
Yeah, I felt that too, because one of the things we talked about, to Arthur Smith's credit, is that this is not a situation like it was for the last head coach free, where we saw weeks before he was let go, we saw that locker room pretty much tap out on Dan Quinn. This locker room is far from it. And I think we haven't talked about this a lot, and I think there's a good reason for that, Free, but I think today really showed it. And that is Terry Fontenot. I don't think he's on nearly as much of a hot seat as maybe the guys on the sidelines. And I think part of the reason is because of all the players that you guys called out, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I felt like it was kind of the youth movement, right? So you're looking at these players, particularly this year, DeMarco Hellum showing us some things, Zach Harrison, Clark Phillips III, but you're even talking about not the possibility, but the opportunities that were given to his other class, right? We're talking about Arnold Ebiketie more than anything these past few weeks. So I really think that it's also a good thing where maybe Terry Fontenot isn't doing as much of that kind of fighting for his gig as he has been. And just wanted a quick side note. We just got word that Jake Matthews, there's an update to say that he could have returned into this game. I think it was gone out for a concussion protocol, but that was good to be able to at least know. I'm sorry, knee injury, concussion protocol for Chris Lindstrom. But to see that he could have actually come back and they were just essentially being safe, because of course, Aaron, one of the things that we talk about as well is when we've seen a solid O-line, although they've had to kind of pick and choose and kind of plug and play. But when we see a solid O-line with their anchor as far as the veteran presence there, it's good to know that Jake Matthews could have been back, because that signals they'll probably have him back for next week.
Yeah. I've said it for 2 years now that this team kind of goes where the O-line goes. When the O-line's healthy and playing well, you see games like this when they're either unhealthy or not playing well, like we've seen the last couple of weeks. You see some of the struggles. When it comes to sort of Terry Fontenot and Arthur Smith's job status, I'll sit here, I'll go on the record right now and say I think there's like a 94% chance that Arthur Smith is back next year based off of this game right now. Now I give it at 94 rather than 100, just because you can never put it past the Falcons to have an epic collapse at the end of the year. There's like, that chance. But I think you raise a great point, T, about Terry Fontenot, where like, we've only really had 3 draft classes. The old adage, you got to wait 3 years to sort of judge a draft class. You look back at that 2021 draft class, you can be very questionable about that draft, right? But the jury's still kind of out on the 22-23 drafts. And there's still a lot of promise there that those guys can still deliver, not only this year. We've talked about several of those players, as you mentioned, sort of showing up late in the season. So you're still optimistic and hopeful that those draft classes are going to really form a strong core for this team's future success. So I think that helps Terry Fontenot out a ton. And as you mentioned, the free agent haul this offseason has been lights out on defense. Basically all the players that they signed on defense are basically their best players on the defense outside of AJ Terrell. So like you're seeing positive things, and we know that general managers tend to have a longer leash than head coaches.
Sure.
I think a lot because it's harder to see exactly how their results manifest on the field. So I felt like Terry Fontenot was pretty safe. It was really Arthur Smith that was kind of coaching for his job. But I think given how the Falcons played today, and again, barring some sort of terribleness over the next 2 weeks against the Bears and Saints, and I just, you can tell I don't like saying it out loud, because once I put it out there in the world, it's like the Falcons, you're like, oh, we can do that. We can definitely do that. But I think the Falcons
prophet speaks, it is done. So
yes, exactly.
So I feel like the Falcons right now are in a good place. Maybe, I think you can argue, is it too little too late? Because like, as you said, it's like, this is probably one of the more complete games that they've had this year, but it doesn't feel as satisfying today as it would have felt any other time in the previous 15 games. Because it feels like, is this too little too late? So I think
this would have been played against the Bucks. Imagine like the tone of this season and how it would have changed. It would have been almost 30-point score. Oh my gosh, that would have been it would have been totally different.
Crazy. And I actually had that as one of our questions. We didn't get a chance to get to it, but in that deep dive, that was one of the questions I was going to ask you guys is, is it too little too late? And boy, you kind of get that feeling of what could have been. And we know that this is like a quarterback change where it was Ritter, then it was Heineke, and then it was back to Ritter. Now it's back to Heineke, but it does make you think like, dang, I wonder what it would have looked like if. So it's kind of hard to, if you like it, you appreciate what's happening today, but it also kind of makes you think, oh man, what could have been. But speaking of what could have been, and this is up to you guys, it could be past or present, but as we wrap up, of course, we know that it is Christmas Eve. Tomorrow is Christmas and kids are excited, and maybe we're all excited too. But my question to you guys as we wrap up is about your favorite Christmas, whether it's a Christmas tradition or it's a Christmas memory. What's a favorite part of Christmas for you?
For me, it has to be a Christmas breakfast that we've been doing ever since my wife and I were dating. And then now that we've been married for 11 years, we do a breakfast on Christmas Day. Now it's more like a Christmas brunch, give everybody time to open up gifts and all that stuff. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that tomorrow. So it's going to be really cool to check out.
So I know where I'll be next year if I'm there in Atlanta for Christmas. Since I spent Christmas Eve, since I was supposed to spend Christmas Eve in Lithonia anyway, I'll just move my way over to South Carolina for brunch with the Davises. How about
I'll be doing my famous J-Bowls hot fries. So yeah.
Ooh. Yeah. If they're anything like the brisket, it's on and popping. What about you, Free?
I have a lot of pleasant memories from being a kid, opening up some presents. I remember one gift in particular. It was like a Ghostbusters firehouse play thing. It was like a 3-story Ghostbusters toy. And we not only used that, me and my brothers, we not only used that for a pretend firehouse, we used it as a spaceship. It was a school bus. It was everything. It became our all-encompassing toy. And I just remember that morning waking up on Christmas. I was probably like, I don't know, 6 or 7 or something like that, seeing that thing and being like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. And it still remains the greatest thing I've ever seen 30 plus years later. So that's one of my favorite Christmas memories.
Yeah, and one for me is the same as it is every year. One year I asked my dad asked me rather, hey, what is it that you want for Christmas? And everything that I actually checked off in the Christmas on the wish list, we got it. So that was really, really cool. And I love that. And I also like a new tradition in our family where no matter what, sometime during the holiday, we will definitely check out the movie this Christmas. Listen, I hope you guys have had fun with us this entire 2023 season, the entirety really of this 2023 year. And from our Locked On Falcons Postcast family, Merry Christmas to you guys and happy holidays.